Hey there, folks. This is Coach Rich. Welcome to my next in my series of webinars. Today, I'm going to talk about dialing in race hydration and fueling via your long workouts. Okay, this is the next in a series of webinars I'm doing in 2016. Where let's see, I discussed bike fit, bike handling. Um, Last month, I talked about the race preparation phase. As I was um, doing that webinar, I thought it would be good to talk about dialing in your fueling plan during the race preparation phase, which then indicates a need um, uh, um, for my next webinar, which will be on race execution. So we're just going to keep these rolling all across the summer here. What I'm going to talk about um, uh, is creating and tweaking your plan across the long workouts of your race preparation phase, so that when you get on race day, you know exactly what you're doing every minute of the day in terms of what you're eating, what you're drinking, and most importantly, how to fix and solve problems on race day. Okay, what I won't be talking about is actual race pacing and a race day execution uh, um, strategy. That will be in my next seminar. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to tell you what what our overall race execution guidance is, why that is, and then walk you through how to figure out what works for you in your long workouts, so that when you get to race day, you've got a plan. But I'm actually going to talk about that plan in my next seminar. All right. So let's talk about objectives across your day in each sport. Okay. Um, on the swim, we want you starting with a full tank of carbs and glycogen loaded in your body. We want you as hydrated as possible, topped off on your sodium levels, but we want to do all this in a manner that leaves your digestive tract relatively clean. That this uh, creates requirements for pre-race eating and drinking, beginning on Saturday of race weekend for a Sunday race through race morning. Okay, on the bike, very very important. Your bike is your primary fueling platform across the day, and most importantly, what you do on the bike is about fueling your bike, but also about having you get off your bike and starting your run in the best shape possible. Okay, there's what that means is there's a pretty big difference between how you can or what's acceptable for you finish it. Um, uh, um, Finishing your training ride vice your race day bike. Okay, in training you can accommodate a little bit of slack on, you underhydrated, you underfueled, whatever. But on race day, I can't stress enough how important it is for you to minimize as much as possible your fluid losses on the bike. Okay, so so when you roll into T2 off your bike, you're got to be as hydrated as possible. You're topped off on calories and sodium, i.e., you have not been running a calorie, sodium, or fluid deficit. All right. Dynamics of all this on the bike is aid stations, how to carry what you're going to eat and drink. Your ability to process calories will decrease across your bike, which means that you might have a different fueling strategy in the first 3 hours of the bike vice your last half of the bike. And again, hydration is very, very important on your bike, Ironman bike. On the run, you're going to keep you're basically going to keep up your strategy off the bike, but 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 it has to be tweaked so that as you get deeper in the race, your body is more and more on an edge. Okay, your stomach is more sensitive. You're not as hydrated as you were when you started. Your heart rate is increasing, and your body's just on this knife edge. And you really have to be more and more careful as you get deeper into your run, and you want to be focusing on very, very simple calorie, sodium, and fluid choices, which means that you can accommodate more calories, more fluid on the front end of your Ironman run. All right. So let's talk numbers. From the time that you wake up until your swim start, we like athletes to take in about 700 to 800 calories in a very easy to digest form. All right. I would say you want to be taking in as much as you can, but in a form and doing it early enough, and you've practiced enough so that when you're in line to start your swim, your stomach should feel relatively empty, but you know that you've had about 1,000 calories. All right. On the bike, what's been working for our folks is between 200 and 500 calories per hour as a function of body size and age, meaning larger and or younger athletes can typically take in more calories than older and or less big athletes. All right. And I would encourage you to consider finding the upper end of the number that you can accommodate in training. All right. One of the observations I had last summer working up for Madison was I felt better on my rides when I ate more and I drank more. I used to run kind of lean at between maybe 200 250 calories per hour, but as I started paying attention to what my calorie intake was, what my sodium, what my fluid intake was, I noticed that the last my experience in the last 2 hours of my training rides was dramatically better when I took in more calories and really stayed on top of my fluid intake in the first 2 to 3 hours. So I would encourage you to experiment with the upper range of these data points here. Okay, sodium about 500 to 1 gram of sodium each hour. All right, you want to minimize fluid loss across your bike. So these are the three objectives of your bike: calories, sodium, and fluid. I highly recommend that you look at each of these as three separate items that you're taking in across a range of products so that you can mix and match variables. All right. When I talk about some issues I had as I was training, I found that when I looked at calories separate from sodium, separate from fluid, and I had primary solutions for calories and fluid and sodium, then I was able to mix and match and create my own solution, which was based on my numbers of calories per hour, sodium, and fluid in a manner that I could do. I could do that using what's on the course, but I didn't have to bring my own, custom stuff. Okay, on the run, uh, you know, it's really like at some point on the run you're just doing the best that you can pacing wise, and you really just have to pay attention um, to what's working for your gut. And the net is your calories per hour will be less than what you took in on the bike. But most importantly, you want a simple, easy to execute process. Okay, for example, uh, aid station one, Gatorade and water, and then um, uh, at the third aid station, water, gel, ice, and you're repeating this is a 3 aid station pattern that just repeats over and over again. And then maybe in the last 6 miles, you start substituting Coke for um, uh, sports sports drink. Okay, but you're not so much. I found I wasn't so much keeping track of the math as I was just monitoring how my gut feels. Okay. Um, let's talk about how. Okay, so I've set you up with objectives by sport across your day. What our data says works for athletes across each sport. Now let's talk about how we actually dial that in your training. Um, the net is I've learned that my 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 pre-workout and my pre-race um, eating plan is is very different, and it's been changing over time. Okay, I've found that as I've aged, my ability to process calories in the morning has slowed down, and I'm especially sensitive to very hard efforts in the morning. So in training, I eat very, very little to a cup of coffee and an apple, maybe, prior to a very hard, very challenging, bike ride, a weekday ride. But as that ride gets longer on a weekend ride, I need to eat more, but I'm very sensitive. But I found that my gut has slowed down, and I need to eat either more simple food sources or give myself lots of time to process that. So it sucks, but I found myself waking up at 5 a.m. so I could get in lots of calories before a 7 a.m. bike ride, because I found that if I didn't give myself enough time to process that, it absolutely had a very big impact on the first couple hours of my bike ride. Okay. Now, in terms of what I'm eating, how I'm eating, what you should be doing, um, we last couple years, there's been a program of eating a lot of applesauce with some protein powder mixed in it. I tried that; it didn't work. My gut was too full, and again, one of the biggest variables I have to manage personally is my gut has slowed down. So I have to buy myself extra time by eating early. And I'm eating a bagel with butter and jam on it. But what I'll also do is I will eat sporty foods for breakfast. So gels, Gatorade, a Cliff Bar, very calorie dense but easy to digest foods as a pre-workout slash race day breakfast. So short answer is you just have to experiment paying attention to your gut and paying attention to what's working for you in the first couple hours of your training bike. All right. Um, okay. The we recommend that you train and that you train with and plan to race with what's going to be on the bike course. And the reason is, if I have a plan which is predicated on me using what's on the bike course, then if I have to change that plan, modify that, um, I've got everything I need right there, and I'm also not rolling out on the bike course with a very customized solution that requires me to have extra bottles and gels and baggies, and I must pick up bottles at a special needs station, etc. Now, Gatorade Endurance is not my favorite product by far, okay? But I found myself, early in June last year, I just hated that stuff. But as I forced myself to choke it down, I got used to it, and while I certainly never enjoyed it, I found I could tolerate it more. And for me on race day, I just want stuff that works. And I want it dead simple. I'm not really too concerned with what it tastes like and am I enjoying myself because I'm out there to race. Okay. So what's on the course is Gatorade, power gels, and water. Okay. Um, and uh, and so we recommend that you train and race with what's on the course. And so now let me talk about how I managed this last season as I was trying to figure out what would work for me for Madison last year. Okay, my my problems that I bumped in bumped up against is I wanted to take in between 300 to 4 or even 500 calories per hour, especially in the first half of my training rides. Okay, I started out using Gatorade Endurance exclusively. What I found though is 2 bottles is 600 milligrams. So if I was taking in 2 to 3 bottles, which is 300 to 450 calories, my energy intake was good, but my sodium intake was 900, was 6 to 900, and that was just not good. Okay, what I found is if I take in too much sodium, my skin gets puffy and my fingers swell. So as I'm riding, I'm looking at what are my fingers doing? Is my watch getting tighter, etc. I found out early on that if I use Gatorade Endurance as my only um, fuel source, I got in enough calories, but I was taking in too much salt. Okay, and then balance this out. I sweat like a pig. I sweat an incredible amount. It got so bad where I was having to figure out sock solutions on the run. I was carrying a microfiber towel so that I could wipe myself off and just squeeze out gallons and gallons of sweat on the run. But what I found was, and then uh, by watching my heart rate and my power across my rides, I learned that when I got dehydrated, things went downhill very, very quickly. Okay, so I have to absolutely drink my ass off. But if I drink Gatorade Endurance, I get the calories that I need, but I get much too much sodium, and that's not good. Okay, so what I did was I separated my sources into a fluid source, a calorie source, and a sodium source. Um, and across those sources, I was taking in about 400 calories per hour via Gatorade Endurance gels and those Cliff Blocks. I love these things. Um, uh, I needed to stay at or under about 500 to 600 milligrams of sodium each hour, but I needed to drink literally as much as I could drink. I trained myself to down ginormous quantities of water. I treat my stomach like it's a bike bottle, and every time I stopped to refill bottles and remix, sports drink and stuff, I would drink 1 or 2 full bike bottles of water. I drank as much as I could before I started my ride. I was just a drinking full of water every chance I got, but I was also on top of my calories per hour and my sodium. All right. How did I do this? I tracked everything. Okay, folks, there's no easy way. This is a spreadsheet that I got from Dino. So Dino made this, and then I tweaked it. And today was the first time I've looked at it since I raced. Okay, and so what you've got me doing here is, so I've got these. Um, these are the sources I was going to use on race day, and I've got, where do I have it? These are the details of each source, and I'm just mixing and matching what the quantities were, and I'm bouncing out what my totals are, and I bust it out, per hour. And I'm not a spreadsheet guy. This is not a very sexy spreadsheet, but over time, just from putting each one of my long rides into this spreadsheet, I would make a plan for what I was going to do. I then tracked what I was doing as I was riding. I bounced that off about, so there was what I was going to do, there was what I actually did, and then I took lots of notes on how I felt and what was working and what wasn't working. And from that, I determined my final plan. And then I also um, learned that my body in the last 2 hours of the bike ride was much different from my body in the first 2 hours. So if you were to look at this spreadsheet and stare at it long enough, you would find that, like for example, I think I was taking in I took in more Gatorade Endurance. So I just didn't like this stuff. I found that I really couldn't tolerate it after about 3 hours. So I did the smart guy spreadsheet thing so that I weighted all of my Gatorade Endurance in the first 3 hours of the bike, so that in the last 2 hours I was drinking as much water as I could stand, and I was eating stuff that I liked, like these Cliff Blocks. But I was my plan was to drink 6 bottles of water in the last 2 hours. This plan and this plan was predicated on my number one goal, or my Achilles heel on race day, which is it's very easy for me to get dehydrated, and if I do, things go downhill very, very, very quickly. So in terms of how do you figure this stuff out, you just take notes. Um, I weighed myself naked at the start of my ride. I tracked everything that I ate and drank, how much fluid. I weighed myself afterwards. I jammed everything into these spreadsheets, and I took lots of notes. And before my ride on Saturday, I would go back and look at my notes from last Saturday, figure out what I was going to change, what I was going to do differently, so that every single one of my long rides was an opportunity to have a plan, execute that plan, identify what worked, what didn't work, and make solutions that I would apply to the next ride. And so I will clean up this spreadsheet, or what I'll likely do is just toss it out there into EN land, and someone much, much smarter than me will make us, a very slick spreadsheet. But this is me just banging on numbers, figuring out what worked for me across last summer. And then on the run, again, about maybe 200, 300 calories per hour. But I found what's most important is you 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 eat and you fuel while you're feeling good. You're typically going to feel the best that you're going to feel in the first 6 to 8 miles. And so I I ran out of transition with, I believe, about 6 gels on my belt, and I took in all those gels in the about, well, no, not 6, it was about 4. Um, I took in all of those in about the first 6 miles. I made sure that my heart rate was very low and I could process all those calories. And then as I got deeper into the run course, I just found myself eating and drinking what was working for me at that time, and that shifted less. That shifted away from Gatorade Endurance and more towards Coke. But in terms of training, I set myself up. I used a waste bottle um, with a pocket for gels, and I run with a pair of shorts that has a pocket in the back. And um, so I had that. I had a baggie of Gatorade powder, and I would plan my runs so that I was hitting a water fountain every 3 miles. And so every 3 miles, I was drinking a bottle and I was filling a bottle, and I was alternating a bottle of Gatorade with a bottle of water, and I was taking gels and Cliff Blocks. The net is, in training runs, I was getting probably between 200 to 300 calories per hour. And again, I was just observing heart rate, RPE, and pace changes across my run. And I relearned again just how important hydration state was for me. My indication of a of being hydrated on the run is an elevated heart rate at the same RPE and pace. Okay, so if I could summarize, what's going through Coach Rich's head as I'm training and as I'm racing, it's how do I stay on top of my hydration as much as possible, um, and I'm choosing calorie and sodium sources that are largely separate from my hydration source, so that I can increase or decrease my calorie intake, or increase or decrease my sodium intake, but not have that affect the fluid intake that I was getting in, because for me, staying hydrated was my most important variable I was trying to manage. Okay. And then in terms of how do you do all this, again, it just comes down to making a spreadsheet, doing your homework, crunching numbers, trying stuff out, figuring uh, um, figuring out what works, figuring out what doesn't work, and just taking lots and lots of notes. Okay, and what you end up with is a spreadsheet like this, which tells you what you're going to do across your entire plan. My entire race was 408 calories per hour, 674 grams of sodium per hour, and uh, trying to take in 2.5 pounds of fluid each hour. And then I broke this up into 3 hours. You can see that in the first 3 hours, I'm heavier on the calories and heavier on the sodium. And then in the last 2 hours, I dropped my calories down. I'm thinking that I didn't update these two spreadsheets for this number, because what I probably did was, this was for my race rehearsal, but then I tweaked these sodium numbers, and this is what I ended up with before I race. Okay, all right, folks. I know I covered a lot. If you have any questions, please ask them now. And again, I plan on going into how we execute this across your race, to include race pacing, gearing, climbing, all that stuff. I'll do that in probably in my June webinar. So, questions? Neil. So I used to use, custom products. I would say that as long as you're using, the like the issue I have with you using a solution is you've got like your golden bicycle bottle on your frame or on your down tube or in your bottle launchers, okay? And if you lose that bottle or you miss a hand up or you dump your bottle at special needs something, if you haven't been training with what's on the course, then you don't know if what's on the course is going to work for you. So so we like people to train and race what's on the course because it makes you it greatly simplifies your race execution plan. Now, having said that, a lot of people, including me, have a hard time tolerating Gatorade Endurance. But I found that if I just forced myself to use it, my body just got used to it across the summer. I never enjoyed it. I never dug it. I never looked forward to taking a swig of that bottle, but my body did get used to it. So there's nothing wrong with it, just that it makes for a more complicated race day, and it makes it very difficult for you to solve problems if something happens, i.e., you drop a bottle, or if your custom a solution isn't working for you. If you haven't been training with what's on the course, then you don't know if what's on the course is going to work for you. Brent asks, how do we adjust these recommendations for half Ironman guidance? That's a great question. If you go to where I'm getting a lot of this stuff is from the resources that Patrick and I made for you last year. So go to resources, Racing Member Central, race execution details, and then master race execution for half and full. This is everything we have. We've got, the 4 keys talk. We've got race rehearsals, race execution basics, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Um, in here um, we have fueling guidance for half Ironman and Ironman distance, and run guidance for half Ironman and Ironman distance. So the intent of us creating this page and was to put everything you needed to know about racing long course triathlon, race execution, everything on in one place. So go ahead and find that. Again, that lives under resources, Racing Central, and race execution details, master race execution. All right, Julie. Once you start drinking Coke on the run, does that substitute your Gatorade source? But should you still keep eating gels and blocks? I uh, I don't think there's enough. It just the deeper you get into the run, the more on edge everything is, and I think it's really just a function of paying attention to your gut and figuring out what's working for you right now. I found later on in my run that I just, if I couldn't stomach Gatorade Endurance in the last 2 hours of the bike, and by stomach meaning, I just got sick of it. I really had a hard time with it on the run, and so I found myself sourcing calories from Coke and gels, drinking lots of water, and I also supplemented with salt tabs because I wasn't sure I was getting enough sodium with Coke, with increasing my Coke intake, decreasing my Gatorade Endurance intake, and taking gels because I sourced most of my own gels on the bike. Meaning, I had about 5 gels on my bike that were my gels, and I had about I think four or five shot blocks on my bike and in my pockets. Because I knew what the sodium intake or the sodium content of those gels were. Likewise, when I started on the run, I started with my gels and my shot blocks that I had chosen because I knew what the sodium content was. But as I got deeper into my race and I had taken those sources, I certainly didn't have the mental resources to read a sodium content on the gel that I'm getting at an aid station. So I found myself going with Cokes and gels and taking in a random salt tab, right? Um, okay, folks, that's it for questions. I'm going to get this processed. Look at cleaning up this spreadsheet and posting it. Hopefully, someone else can clean it up and make it fancy for me. And I'll get this posted out for everyone, and I'll publish um, the date and specifics of my next webinar as soon as I figure it out. But it will probably be something on race execution, given that we're coming into we're deep into the half Ironman season, and we're coming up on the Ironman season. All right. Thanks for listening, folks. Bye.